Well, welcome again. It's been a minute since we've done a getting to know your Indiana neighbor. Really looking forward to this one, though. This man right here is Richard Dick Bird Larkin. Kind of sounds like we're starting an obituary. I know.
A lot of aliases.
But Dick Larkin, and talking to him for a number of reasons. But one of the things a little bit later, we'll be connecting the dots to the Larkin family history. The Larkins, of course, from the business aspect, are probably unmatched in regards to what they've given to our community, and it goes way back. So we'll talk about some of that. We'll talk about what Dick's been up to. But I can tell you that Dick is in town this weekend as part of the LHS class of 1981. They're celebrating their 40th and 41st anniversary, right? Their reunion.
Thank you, COVID.
Yeah, last year was COVID, so they're going to celebrate. And our outstanding alumnus, Patrick Summers, is also a member of that class. And in just a few hours, Dick will present to Patrick Summers the Outstanding Alumnus Award. So we're all looking forward to that. So first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome back. When was the last time you've been to Lagodi?
It was probably, it was for, unfortunately, I make it back for funerals.
Yeah.
So it was for my aunt's funeral a couple of years ago. So, we try to make it back every few years. There's fewer and fewer of us around.
So I told Dick that we were going to meet at the library. I purposely didn't tell him that the old library is not there anymore on North Line Street. I figured he would figure it out, and he did. But pretty nice little library we have here.
This is gorgeous, man. I'm telling you.
Francis L. Folks.
There you go. Man,
we were trying to think of the library name just prior to this, and it just popped in my head. And when things pop into my head, I have to get them out quickly, or else they'll go. But yeah, this is a nice library, isn't it?
It's gorgeous. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Pretty fancy.
Well, obviously, Patrick Summers had asked you to present, so you and Patrick must have a special relationship dating way back to childhood.
I can't remember not being friends. And so, we were before kindergarten, so we were close kind of all the way through. And so I even remember when they got their first piano. And
wonder if he still has it.
Well, no, yeah, it's funny because I was asking him about that, and it was his dad was a mail carrier and had bought it secondhand from a guy near Shoals, and it was a honking thing. But he and I have stayed friends, and even though our lives have taken vastly different paths, we've still stayed in contact with and see each other every few years.
So did he just give you a call and say, "Hey, here's what's going on. Do you mind?"
I was trying to twist his arm to come back in 2020, and then that ended up being canceled. And then so he reached out when the Alumni Association wanted to offer him this or to present this award. And they've been trying to get him for years.
Yeah.
And he said, I can finally make it. Can you make it? And so I said, perfect. It just worked out that our schedules kind of lined up, and I said, yeah, absolutely. So
that's fantastic. And he did make it, but this recording is the day of the alumni, just a few hours from right now here in Lagodi. And Patrick had a little adventuresome trip getting in, but we think he did from Colorado. So good for that. But it's great, but not only with Patrick, but to be able to get together with your classmates. I don't know if you've been able to try to make the reunions or not, but the class of 81, you're only 2 years behind me, and that was a pretty special class.
It was a good time. This will be my first one.
So
I'm kind of embarrassed to say that.
Oh, you'll love it.
I'm looking forward to it.
Well, good. So growing up, your nickname was Bird. So let's get this out of the way. First of all, do people still call you that?
It's funny. I can tell who's an old time friend and who's a newer friend. But being named Dick was not the easiest thing being a teenager, and so I'm like anything.
So Bird was anything.
Bird was. It actually came from my just visiting Pat Daly, and she's in a nursing home, and her husband Bill Daly called me Dickie Bird.
Okay.
And that's where it kind of came from, and so that kind of stuck. And
why? I mean, what did?
We were idiots, so. But it was a whole lot easier to use that than to be called Dick.
So Bird's fine, right? Okay.
Yeah, when I became a professional, they're like, no, you have to use the name. You have to use your real name.
Yeah, you do. So in a moment, like I said, we'll try to connect the dots with the Larkin business history. But let's start with you, because that gets into it. But your parents, your siblings.
Yeah, my dad Jerry and Inez. So Larkin, they lived here in Lagodi, and she was from Jasper. So she was part of the Rising family, and they had the store on the square in Jasper. And so it was interesting, the two merchants families.
Yeah.
And so they lived in Lagodi their entire lives and, or,
Mhm.
effectively and raised, I have two older, there are five kids. One of them is deceased now, my sister Marilyn. Uh, but Ginger, Drew, Marilyn, me, and then a bonus baby, Leslie. So
Leslie.
five
Mhm.
kids.
Yeah, I think what I remember about Leslie, unfortunately, I was walking home from school, and I think this is true.
This is
Leslie,
true.
okay,
Yeah.
I was walking home from school, and she was riding her bike. No, maybe, I don't know if she's riding her bike or just running, but anyway, she got hit by a vehicle, right? You remember this?
I think she might have been nicked. Yeah.
Yeah, Nick. Well, here's the thing that I remember because I saw it. You're right. I mean, it wasn't a full-blown collision, and then she just ran, and I'm thinking, how is she doing that? I think she was a little bit in shock, but everything was fine. But I witnessed that, and I was scared to death for her. But everything was fine. But no,
I think
that's
we got a dog out of that deal.
how's that?
I think we got your dog. I think your family had a puppy that somehow she got a hold of this dog. It was a great dog that we had it for years. But
I,
that's
I don't know that I remember that.
they called him Blarney. It was a
What was it?
cute little dog named Blarney, a little
Blarney.
mix,
Okay.
a little dog out of
And
that.
Drew, I don't actually. My grandson has it, but I'm sure Drew won't remember this. But I bought a baseball glove off of Drew
Uh,
that my grandson has today, even. And so you're talking, well, years ago. And I used it during my high school baseball days. So $20, which was a
yeah,
pretty good deal at
wow,
the
that's a
time.
lot. Yeah.
And there are a lot of errors in that glove. And I'd like to have a refund, Drew, if you're.
Yes.
I don't guess he remembers that. But Drew didn't play baseball later on. He played Little League. So I guess he didn't have a use for it, and I did. So
Yeah. Well,
deal struck.
there you have it.
Yeah.
He had the only athletic talent in the family. I had
Uh-huh.
none of that.
None of
So
that.
none of
Okay.
that.
Well, what was it like when you were growing up? Let me mention too, because again, I get away from it. But your dad and mom, Hicks and Chick square dance.
Dixon and chicks square dancing, and they loved to square dance,
Yeah.
and that became kind of their big social thing all the way through. In fact, I gave my dad a T-shirt once that said, "I'm the guy who put the square in square dancing," just because it's silly.
How did you get
But
started in that? Any
they,
idea?
they were looking for something to do. They were always really social. And I
Yeah.
think one of the things, the fabric of the community is they had a lot of friends
Hmm.
and somebody got into it and then they loved buying, I know my mom especially loved buying these dresses
Hmm.
and the petticoats and all of this. And then they had favorite callers that they would go out to and it gave them something to do. It gave them a
Yeah.
place to go. It was a physical activity. They got a little exercise out of it, and
Hmm.
they just loved it. And even they would go down to Texas and spend their winters in Texas. And there were a lot of folks from this area that would go down there, and they would square dance down there as well
Hmm.
too. So it became from the time I was in probably high school all the way through the end of their lives. They square danced as long as they possibly could. And
Yeah.
the day that my mom passed, they were going to go square dancing and I get choked up. But she laid down for a nap, didn't wake up.
Is that right? And that would have been what year?
All right, that was probably she was 69 years old,
Hmm.
so it was. Uh,
Yeah.
dates
You
escape me.
you know it's just
Yeah,
not something
it
as
was.
that memory right now as you're thinking about that. But
It
wow.
would have been around 90. It would have been around 97,
Yeah.
98.
So she was dancing all the way up to her
Yeah,
death.
yeah, oh yeah.
Wow.
And she was in great health. She
Yeah.
just
Just like
had
people
like an
do.
aneurysm or something.
Yeah.
She's
But I remember specifically the outfits. If I remember correctly now, the men, white pants, and it seems like could have been different outfits, but maybe a pink or blue, purple.
they
I mean, a checkered, the kerchief, right?
crazy shirt
Is that
kerchiefs,
right?
and oh yeah, they were
Mhm.
all dolled up, and
Yeah.
the pants matched or the shirts matched the
Yeah.
dress, and they were all
White
color
shoes, I think,
coordinated.
for your dad. Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember
it
that the
was.
Martin County Fair, maybe the Opry, maybe a
They
time
would
or
do
two there.
that, and they do these presentations around, and for them it was just a great way to
Mhm.
go. And I don't know how good they were, but I know they had a great time, and that really like it's not like you're going to
Uh,
go pro or something, right?
yeah.
So they had a great time with it.
So at the
Um,
time, is it anything that as a child embarrassed you, or
oh,
was it, hey, it was a lot of
terribly.
fun?
As
Did it?
as a kid, you're always embarrassed with your parents anyway, and then this was just horrific.
Yeah.
But it was something that kept them. As I've gotten older, the thing that I really appreciate are these like deep family connections and these kind of that go back generations actually, but
Mhm.
those are things that as I've moved away, they're almost impossible to recreate.
Right.
Right. And so those, when I come back, there's so many memories of all of these things
Mhm.
that you kind of take for granted. I mean, you kind of know it's special, uh, but then you don't really realize it until it's gone.
Mhm. When you were 10 years old, Dick, what did you want to be when you grew up?
You know, so when I was a kid, I loved uh, the comedians on TV.
Yeah, I did
And
too.
I loved George Carlin. And so my parents were, whenever George Carlin would be on the Tonight Show, they would wake me up and let me sit in their room and watch George Carlin on TV. And I wanted to be
Good
a
for them.
professional comedian. I
Yeah.
thought that was, and I never kind of
Mhm.
saw how those dots connected. Well, you know, what's interesting is years and years later, I was in Chicago and ended up at the Second City in Chicago, which is the improv theater that really, like Saturday Night Live, it's their training ground. And I spent 3 years there in their training programs as a writer, and I was not a good performer. I realized very quickly like that was not my
Yeah.
calling. But as a writer, I wrote, co-wrote a show that played there for a month, and to me it was a way. I was paying them; they weren't paying me,
Yeah.
but it was a way to experience
Mhm.
that whole process of writing and getting out there.
You see, now I could do 100 of these shows, and I guarantee you, not one of them, other than Dick Larkin, would say he aspired to be a stand-up comedian. I mean, that's amazing. But so, and in high school, as I remember you, um, don't take offense to any of these adjectives, I guess, describing you, but kind of a quirky, off the beat sense of humor. So that kind of fits with the comedians, right?
Completely out of control,
I wasn't going there.
and no respect for authority,
Yeah.
and so which kind of allowed me. It's allowed me to just do
Mhm.
crazy things,
Yeah.
often with impunity, because it's like, well, let's just do things.
Yeah.
Let's just make calls and let's just go. Let's see what happens with it.
Mhm.
And
Did you ever get in big time trouble for that?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
So you know, often you know, it's interesting because as a writer of jokes,
Yeah.
so uh, for a period of time, I was working in a Yellow Pages company,
Okay.
and which is like, Yellow Pages, like where did this come from? But if you think about it, it was a huge industry of local advertising.
Absolutely.
And so I was there, I was the pre-internet guy. So
Mhm.
it was a crazy series of events, but I ended up introducing, kind of transitioning print Yellow Pages to the internet. And when the internet was really young, like this data just didn't exist. You couldn't find it. There were no
Mhm.
national databases. It was nothing. This was way before Google. And we had a huge field team of salespeople across the country selling ads to businesses that would show up in the books.
Mhm.
And my job was to get them to also sell ads that would show up online, and then to actually invent the process for online Yellow Pages directories, and trying to convince these hardline print folks that thought these books will never go away. They've been around for 100. These books started publishing right after the Civil War, and they're going to be here long after.
That's
Well,
right.
I'll give you $10. Find one now. You can't
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
one. So to communicate with this field sales force that did not want to sell my product, I started writing a monthly news or a weekly newsletter. And I first started sending out sales reports, and we had people across the country, and they would not read it at all. And it was email. And so I started writing jokes that would go into the newsletter, and I would find funny pictures online and make snarky
Like memes today, right?
memes. Yeah. Exactly. Now they're everywhere. In those
Yeah.
days, you just really didn't
He
see
invented
them.
the meme.
It's my fault. But what I found is people would read the jokes. And
Yeah.
if I sent out jokes, then they would read the newsletter, and then they would sell some internet ads.
Mhm.
Well, and it was just me and it was me and one other guy, and then an engineer, and we were kind of putting this together with. It was
Yeah.
very rudimentary. Like every week, I never missed, would send out a newsletter with jokes and funny pictures, and then I couldn't get any feedback, so I started putting in riddles, and so I created a couple of characters, Buford and Festus, and called it Redneck Riddles, and I would take riddles and send them out, and if you could answer it, we'd send you a
Yeah.
prize, and so I'd get feedback, back and forth. Well, I did this without fail for 7 years.
Wow.
And what I found is it kept growing, and then it would grow beyond our business and had a pretty sizable following. And there were a couple things that happened. One, it ended up being hugely financially successful. So the company ended up being sold for billions of dollars, and it was just for us, it was just kind of life changing.
Sure.
And we didn't get that kind of money, but we had enough to walk away for a little bit, and but it also opened how much joy I would get every day of writing stories and writing jokes and publishing them. And here's kind of the reality. Some of those don't age very well. And taste and mores and things change, right? So
Yeah.
you can't say things you used to be able to say.
Right.
And you can't do things that you used to be able to do. And so I was working for a healthcare company, and it had big aspirations. And somebody went through every single thing I'd ever written.
Yeah.
And they said, you can't say that.
Yeah.
And we're fired. I got fired.
Wow.
And,
Well, I mean, yeah.
And I said, well, you could say it when I said it, you could say it.
I know.
But I'm like, all right, it actually.
Yeah. So you were canceled again before canceling with wow.
I got canceled.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, it actually has worked out very, very well.
Yeah. Who were some of your really good friends? I know we talked Patrick, but growing up, whether it's through grade school, through high school, who were some of your good friends?
In my class, there was a couple. Phil Arvin.
Sure.
He and I were super close. Mark Matthews.
Yeah.
Yep. So I was more friends with people that were a year ahead than even in my class. So there was a group there. There was Mark Matthews and Tim Strange, David Lithgow, Mark Nycom, Steve Searles, Bobby Kennedy, Boppo. Like all of them had crazy nicknames, right? And what was interesting was it was a group that they didn't really drink. Which was fun. But we were always doing mischievous things, like idiotic things, like we would shuck corn and throw corn at people, like at their windows and at their cars, like corning. It's the most hillbilly thing ever. But it was a lot of like fun, crazy things. And then the other kind of close friend, he's actually from Shoals, is Kerry Albright. His dad had the Chevy dealership, and so
I know Kerry
he's a close friend. And actually tomorrow, Mac Daly and Kerry and I are having coffee at McDonald's, and our parents, Gary Albright and Bill Daly and Jerry Larkin, had coffee every day, sometimes twice a day for maybe 60 years. Like they never missed. And so it's kind of cool to see that come back in. And there was there were people that would kind of come in, but then they would come in for a while and they would fade out, but that core was there relentlessly, like forever.
So I was going to ask you, on a Friday night outside of basketball season, what might you be doing? But you're telling me you might be doing something that could get you into some trouble pretty well every Friday night.
Well, so until then, so I started working at Larkin Brothers department store when I was 10. My brother Drew, 3 years older, he was 13, and he needed a job, or he wanted a job, and it was easier to work for your grandfather than your father. So my dad had the furniture store, and my grandfather had the clothing store. And so Drew got a job with Granddad, and I being a tag-along brother, I was like, well, I want a job too. Like, that sounds like a good, if you're doing that, I can do it. Well,
and I can tell jokes,
Yeah, that's exactly what I want.
I can entertain you.
I'll keep you happy. And my grandfather, man, he was a tough old dude. He was great, but I worked for him effectively from the day I turned 10 every day, including weekends, until I graduated from high school. He passed when I was a junior in high school, and and then but I was with him. I worked there every day, and so on Friday nights, he said, "What would I be doing on Friday night?" On Friday nights, we had to keep the store open late because what would happen is people would go over and they would have dinner at Matthias's tavern or restaurant, and then they would walk across and they would walk through the store over to Ye Opry.
A little shortcut.
And they would never buy anything because they were going to the.
Especially if it's cold, right? Walk right through the store.
And I used to hate it because I'm like, man, I want to go out with my friends,
Yeah.
but we would have to stay, and nobody would ever buy anything. And I told my granddad, I said, why are we even open? Because they
Hmm.
never buy anything. And he
Right.
says, but they might come back.
Yeah.
And he says, when he was growing up, if somebody was standing on the street corner, they wouldn't close the store because he might come in. And it was that
Might come in.
it might come in.
Hmm.
And he said, you'd stay open. And as long as somebody's out there, you'd stay
Hmm.
open as late as it took. Didn't matter. And that was the
Interesting.
mindset
Yeah.
uh, that merchant. And
Hmm.
that's what allowed them to survive through, you know,
Hmm.
100 years,
Yeah.
107 years.
Who are some of your influences as far as teachers or otherwise that you remember?
Yeah, so there were a couple. One, you interviewed Greg Johnson.
Yeah, Greg Johnson.
First of all, Lagodi is blessed with a lot of great teachers,
Absolutely.
and I'll forget some
And
of the
and they,
names.
and we still are. We still are.
It's a really special place. So kind of all the
Mhm.
way through. My kindergarten teacher was Mrs. Olson,
Yep, mine too.
Florence Olson,
Hmm.
and it's funny that she had a huge impact.
Hmm.
But then also Judy Klusner,
Yeah.
she had loved her. I actually had a crush on her. Yeah, it's like, oh, she's so pretty. Um, yeah,
Did you hear that, Judy?
yeah, and the nuns, of course,
Yeah.
Sister Jane Marie and
Yeah.
Sister Mary Agnes and
Hmm.
kind of all of the nuns there, and then coming up into high school especially. So there are a couple. So Greg Johnson,
Hmm.
tremendously influential.
Well, Greg has a sense of humor similar to
Oh,
yours.
he's so funny.
Yeah.
Oh, and I remember
Mr.
writing
Johnson, I'm sorry.
Mr. Johnson. I remember writing stories that if they were shown today, it would also
Hmm.
get me canceled again.
Yeah.
Um, him, Steve Paline
Hmm.
taught graphic arts or like mechanical drawing, which is funny. It's funny these things that you still do, and even typesetting. So they had a print shop there that Ernie Martin and Steve Paline did. John Neff read the shop class, and I'm mechanically disadvantaged, so I can't.
Hmm.
Anything I touch is going to,
Right.
draw blood. Uh, but he had a great shop class there. Randy Mills was a great
Yeah.
teacher. Anna Ackerman, kind of hands down, is
Well, you're nailing them.
league of her own.
Yep.
Uh, uh, Carolyn Johnson, the chemistry
Hmm.
teacher.
Mr.
Yeah,
Johnson's wife.
what's funny is I still remember like crazy little tidbits of chemistry.
Hmm.
And
More than I
you
do.
know,
Yeah. That's more than I do.
um, uh,
Hmm.
Grannon was a geometry teacher.
Yeah.
Larry Whitecamp, trigonometry. Was a very hard class. I did not do well in that.
Hmm.
Um, the Ann Ozer,
Hmm. Mrs. Ozer.
Chief
Yeah.
Ozer. There was a woman in junior high.
Miss John.
Miss John.
Yeah.
There you go.
Diane John.
Diane John. Okay. Vic Herm. Vic Herm was important. There were so many that were just
Hmm.
so tight. And Ed Hamilton, I was in band.
Yeah.
Ed Hamilton was very
Hmm.
influential. Um, he kind of really helped me through. I was so rebellious and just so uncontrollable. I don't know if I had ADHD or
Hmm.
just a bad attitude, but he kind of really helped me from going completely off the deep end.
Yeah. Did he now?
Oh, yeah, maybe. I don't know. So,
Okay. Well, that leads to something else
there you
that
go.
maybe this led you to go off the deep end, but you didn't bring it up.
I'll bring it
But you were the lion mascot.
the lion mascot.
Yeah, there was an incident at Vincennes Lake in high school. Right? You remember this? So wait a minute. So to this day, you told me that now nobody remembers that. To this day, people have brought it up to me. Were you there at this game at Vincennes Lincoln as the lion mascot? Do you want to finish the story from there?
So I was lion mascot, which I loved because there was this anonymity, and
Yeah.
and the more the crowd fed, the more I fed the
Oh
crowd.
yeah. Yeah.
And so it just kept spiraling of like,
Mhm.
what else can we do? What else can we do? What else can we do? Of trying various stunts and things. And
Mhm.
I remember at Vincennes, because they're like the Alice's.
They were the
I don't
Allisons.
even know what an Alice is,
Yeah.
but so they had this little statue that was, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 feet tall or something,
Mhm.
that they would wheel out to the middle of the of the center of the basketball court when they're warming up.
Yeah.
Well, I was just dancing around, listening, looking for trouble to get into, and
Entertainment.
I entertained the crowd.
Yeah.
And I saw this thing, and I said, well, I, I, I said, well, like a dog, I went over and hiked my leg on it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what he did. That's what he did.
And I held it there for a long time.
Any pictures though? Because I've not seen any pictures.
I didn't, but I was
Yeah.
pretty sure I was going to get expelled for that.
Yeah.
But I didn't.
So as you hiked your leg continuously, were you thinking, hey, they really, really like it? Or were you thinking, I'm really, really going to get in trouble for this?
Both. I mean, I didn't care. Like I was like, I'm just going to.
They love it. They love it.
I'm going to do this. But to me, it was so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
I could never play basketball.
Yeah.
And Lagoti's basketball. And basketball is Lagoti. And so it gave me a chance to be a part of that audience. And to have and to just kind of be able to be free to do things.
Yeah. Did you get in trouble for it?
I did not.
No.
Amazing.
Neither of the administrations came to you and drug you by the mane. And
I thought that I would, but I said, I might have pushed it too far this time.
Apparently not. Apparently not. But no, that's one of the most entertaining times in the mascot history, although there's been a few. And I'm sure you've riled up the opposition a time or two on purpose.
I remember Jasper had a group of guys called the Army or the Squad or something like that. And they dressed in Army fatigues and had little toy guns, which, God, you couldn't do that today, right?
No.
And so to spoof them, I got a little Army fatigues and a toy gun and pretended to shoot them. Just to give them trouble.
Yeah, sure.
And,
a little back and forth, right?
Helen Deerwester reminds me of.
Yeah, Helen.
Okay, all right.
Helen Nolly at the time.
Helen Nolly. Reminded me of taking paint thinner, a fake paint thinner, and removing a W in the Washington and putting a big L on their logo in the middle. I don't remember that, but it's.
You don't remember doing that? Maybe a little too much paint thinner.
It probably happened.
Oh my! I'll tell you what. Okay, so you're through high school somehow, some way. He gets through high school.
Yep.
Not only do you get through high school, just like your dad, just like your brother, you went to Notre Dame, right? You had a sister that graduated.
Sister went to Notre Dame too, Maryland.
Yeah.
Yep. And I had no kind of clue where I was going or what to do. And Notre Dame has a legacy program where they'll take kind of underachievers. So I come from a long line of overachievers, and I put an end to that nonsense.
Yeah.
But, they have a legacy program that lets underachievers like me in. And I remember sitting there at freshman orientation, and they were reading they were bragging about all of this incoming class, about how impressive the incoming class was, and they listed all of these, the varsity athletes, multiple sports, and the SAT scores, and I realized I was below average on every single measure. So I said, well, let's just do this, and I love being a mascot.
Yeah.
And I just got so much joy out of that. So at Notre Dame, they have a leprechaun.
Yes,
well,
they do.
In those days, you had to be a short white guy to get that. Now there's body positive and you can be anything. But in those days, I was too tall and 5'11", and they said, no, you're
That's discrimination right there. Yeah.
So I called up the NBC affiliate in South Bend, WNDU, and said, you all need a mascot. And they're like, we don't need a mascot. I said, no, you really need a mascot, and I should be it. And you should get like the San Diego chicken, the 93 chickadee. And the guy says, no, he says, we should do a kangaroo. You kangaroo. I said, done and done. And he says, we'll pay you. It's $25 every time you show up someplace, or $5 an hour, which to me was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And on about the third or fourth event, they were doing a live live TV broadcast, the opening of Bendix Woods ski slope in South Bend, which South Bend's pretty flat, but they had a hill there that they had a little ski area there. And I said, okay, here's the deal. You're gonna be in the kangaroo, the big kangaroo outfit, big giant things. And they said, we're gonna put you on top of the hill here, and you're gonna ski down. We want you to, have a whole trail of kids behind you, and they're gonna all be holding sparklers, and you're gonna have this trail. We're gonna have on live TV. It's gonna be beautiful. Here we go. Yeah. They said, just wait for the high sign, and then you go. Well, I had never been on skis before.
I was, okay. All right.
All right. So
You didn't tell them that,
you
though.
could count, no, they were going to pay me. If I
Yeah.
told them, they wouldn't have paid me. So,
Correct.
so I'm at the top of the hill on first time ever on skis, and the thing I didn't know is you're supposed to shush on skis.
Everybody knows you're supposed to shush.
I had no idea. I had water skis, which means
Yeah.
you go straight. So, so I just point my skis straight down, and in a kangaroo outfit on my very first time on skis, I rocket down this hill straight. I'm just picking up speed, and it's like a bowling ball running. These kids are, it's knocking people down, and I'm all the way through into the parking lot, and I hit I, I hit a snow fence, which finally stopped me and destroyed the outfit, and I got fired. But they said they were really mad at me at that point, and that ended that. Well, I was like, okay, I'm suddenly unemployed again, and well, I needed, so I was broke, and I was trying to find money, and so they had Notre Dame has a student manager program, and I said, well, I don't know anything about, I knew nothing about football or sports or anything. I was kind of an idiot, and I said, but they give you free books, so you get free books if you'll show up to be a student manager. And I'm like, well, that sounds like a pretty good deal. So I started being a student manager, and 130 people showed up to do this. And if you just kept coming, you eventually could work your way up. And they whittled it down from 130 student managers as freshmen. And there was a new head coach there, Jerry Faust, and it was the end of an ugly. It was the beginning of an ugly. Of an ugly
the Jerry Faust years. Yeah.
But I started working with them and working as a student manager. And then at the end, there were 3 managers picked to run the football program. And I was one of the 3. And became got a scholarship and a monogram, and was working with a lot of athletes like Tim Brown, who won the Heisman, and Steve Berline and John Carney, a lot of guys that had very successful careers. Mark Bavaro played for the Giants. I mean, tons of them. But I worked my way through college there, and it was, to me, that was so foundational at recognizing how to just stick with it, and people with vastly more talent. But I would just outlast them. I said, I'll just keep showing up.
Well, it's funny, student managers, and we had this conversation. I don't know if you watched the Bob Lovell interview that we had, but Terry Prather from Laguna.
Yep.
Well, he's president of Franklin College, right? And he also never played sports, but his foundation, I think, was a student manager where he learned everything that he knew, and that's my assumption. And not only that in sports, but of course in business.
Yeah.
I mean, he is a great coach too, but as an administrator, obviously, president of Franklin College is not too bad. But that lays a great foundation, doesn't it? Attention to detail.
Yeah, Lou Holtz says that whenever he meets a student manager, someone who had been a student manager, he says, "What company are you running?"
Yeah. And is that right?
Yeah.
So
it really became a and I was completely out of control then too. But it helped lay this foundation of just keep showing up, be of service. It's not about you. Do whatever it takes. And we could spend 10 hours talking about antics along those ways, but and then just recognizing problems before they come up and solving them.
Did you ever meet Lou Holtz?
Oh yeah. Met Coach Holtz and a number of the greats.
Of course, he's got so many motivational videos out there. The one that I really get a kick out of, though, is he's with a kicker, and it's practice. And he's a great kicker. But Lou Holtz is around, and he's watching him, and the kid just can't do anything. And the kid says, "Coach, I just can't kick while you're watching." He goes, "Well, son, I'm going to be at every ball game, right?" But he was a great motivational speaker.
Very funny, too.
Yeah. But I did not know. So we're learning things that I never knew about you, student manager at Notre Dame. That's fantastic. But I still can't get over when you went home and said, "Hey, Mom and Dad, guess what? I got a scholarship to this underachievers program." I never heard of that one before. But congratulations.
It was, thank goodness for it too. I had too much pride to take money from my parents to pay for college.
No kidding.
And Dad, I mean, super hard worker, but he never took any money out of his business. And, there were 3 of us at Notre Dame at the time. And so I just said, and I'd saved up quite a bit by the time I graduated and worked really hard. And so I said, you know what, I think I'm going to do this.
Hmm.
And I did.
Wow. All right. Well, let's connect the dots a little bit. How far back into the Larkin family history are you familiar?
Well, so in my office in Chicago, I have
Hmm.
a home in Chicago. And in my home office, I have a portrait of Patrick B. Larkin and his wife, Ellen Crane. And so he was the first one to come in this area. He was born in Ireland, and he was the one who eventually came to Montgomery, made it to New York, right, kind of potato famine time. So his lifespan almost exactly overlaps Abraham Lincoln's lifespan, which is kind of amazing. He was
Right.
born a year before, and he died like a year after,
Okay.
something. It's almost
Yeah.
almost complete overlap.
Hmm.
So it helps put it in
Yeah.
context of where was he.
Yeah.
And so he was the one who made it here to um, eventually to Mount Pleasant,
Yep.
and eventually the Larkin Farms. He had a couple of sons that became the Larkin brothers that started the department store. But he eventually had a farm of over 1,000 acres. Um,
So the Larkin Farms, what did they do as a business? Who are the patrons?
so it's a good question. I'm
Hmm.
not exactly sure. I know they had a couple of oil wells, which I didn't know there was any oil in here. I don't think there's very much. Otherwise,
No.
they'd still be drilling.
Yeah.
But they raised about everything. And my grandfather, Joe Larkin, and Joe was born in he was born in 1896, died in 1990 or 1980. Um, he told me, in fact, there was a picture, you posted this, of the first alumni awards or
Hmm.
banquet,
Hmm.
and he was the oldest alumni. So he graduated from LaGodie in 1914.
Yeah.
And so he
Yeah.
told me the story of growing up there, and
Hmm.
it was a tough life. He was the
Sure.
black sheep of the family, and cutting down trees with his uncle and building a barge and going around to all of the farmers around there and putting things on the barge and floating it down the White River all the way to New Orleans. It's 800 miles.
Yeah.
And there's no shortcuts. So
Right.
he and his uncle floated this barge full of goods and
Hmm.
whatever the farmers had to sell all the way down. They were robbed along the way, but they made it to New Orleans, sold the barge, sold everything, bought horses, and rode back.
Wow.
And so whenever I'm sitting in an airport and there's a flight delay, I'm thinking,
Yeah.
I'm not floating a
Hmm.
barge to New
No.
Orleans, right? It's,
Yeah.
and you realize as I look at that portrait of my grandfather's grandfather, and it
Hmm.
hangs right behind my desk. Uh, I just remember like every single thing in my life is
Hmm.
easier than every single
Yeah.
thing in his life.
Yeah.
Every single thing.
Hmm.
And it's not that long ago, really.
No, no, it really isn't. I mean, yeah, I mean, when you think about that, what some of us have, we were talking about this with our family the other day. I think we were talking with my uncle and his great grandfather, just great grandfather, would have been around the Civil War era.
Yeah,
So
right.
it's not very far removed. It seems like it, but it really isn't.
And so they ended up when the the railroads came through Lagodi and Lagodi became a thing.
Yeah,
They opened a store in Lagodi in
they were
1882.
in Mount Pleasant at the time. Is that right?
They must have had a store out on Mount Pleasant,
Hmm.
and then I think they shut that and moved it to Lagodi and had a little store on the main square triangle. And in 1882, and then in 1889 they built the building that's there today.
Hmm.
And so that became the core there. And the Larkin brothers were um, uh, Frank Larkin, which had the Brooks House. It's kind of out on 550, and then uh, uh, Patrick Larkin has the one that's kind of it's the big brick house. It's on the way out to the cemetery. It's got
Yeah, it's
I don't
got
know what the
PB
name of it is.
Larkin.
Yep,
Oh,
yep.
yeah, it's well, Bernie Smith and Marianne live in that home right
Okay,
now.
yeah.
It's on Main and Kentucky Avenue.
Okay,
Hmm.
good.
Yeah,
I'm street confused. So
me too. But I just threw out that, and I have no idea if that's right or not. But
I,
it's
I think you're probably right. But they started the store, and then eventually, I mean, it lasted until I got a hold of it, and then that and Walmart
Mhm.
kind of
Yeah.
ended it after 107 years. But my
Hmm.
dad, my grandfather had started what became Home Outfitters,
Hmm.
and then my dad ran Home Outfitters with his brother Ray, and Ray ran the Jasper store, and they had Jasper and Lagodi, Washington, Paoli, and eventually when I came back for a couple of years, we opened in Vincennes, and then we had the opportunity kind of out of the blue to sell the thing, which we took that opportunity in 1989. But then Cousins, it's funny, you'd come into to Lagodi and you would see Larkin Lumber, and that was a kind of a first cousin that was Pat Larkin, and then Jim and Frank's Red and White, right? Which was his brother. That was Jim Larkin, Jim, and Lenore. They had that. Handy Mart, which is now Pizza Junction.
Right.
There were a number of businesses around, but those were kind of the ones that had the names on there.
Yeah. So Home Outfitter. See, I didn't realize. I assumed because there were several different stores, it might be a chain of some sort. But you guys had, your family had all of those Home Outfitter stores. Okay, I didn't realize that. I knew it was Lagodi, Jasper, Washington, wherever else you said, but I didn't realize that you had all of those.
Yeah, and when in 1989 we were approached by Heilig Myers, which was a national chain, and they were going out buying all of these small town furniture stores. And I had come back to Lagodi. I'd been a CPA in Chicago for a couple of years for the company that's now Deloitte. I came back and I got to the point where I said, well, if I'm ever going to own my own business or be a part of this, I need to do it now because my dad's getting older and time is getting away. So I came back and joined him for a couple of years. I was amazed at how little he ever paid himself. Like he really he invested everything back into the business. It was a good business, but was not a very lucrative business.
Sure.
I mean, it kept the family alive, and we didn't starve by any stretch, but it wasn't. It was never rolling in dough. And when we had the opportunity to sell, I actually raised money. When I came back, he said, "Well, this is what we've built. If you want something else, you need to build it and be a part of that." And so I engineered a buyout of a store in Vincennes, as Hudson Furniture, and so I bought that, and I had no money. Like I was 22 or whatever, and so we figured out how to borrow money and buy that, and then that was very, very successful in that store, in running that, and I owned a third of that, and then with my dad and uncle. And so I said, okay, we're on a good path here. Well, then kind of out of the blue, a couple things happened. One, my sister was killed kind of by tragedy. A drunk driver hit her while she was bicycling. And my parents really, they were just devastated.
Sure.
And so that was just a killer. But then at the same time, Heilig Myers approached us with a cash offer to buy out the inventory and rent the building. And so I separately raised money. I didn't raise the money, but I secured financing to be able to buy it myself. And we got to the point, because you never know if these deals are going to close. And we got to the point where it was sign or walk. And I said, if I screw this up, my parents are going to be broke. And otherwise, they can get enough to just be comfortable the rest of their lives. I said, I'm going to go ahead and sell it. And so I kind of washed my hands of it and was trying to figure out, the department store was on a downward trend, but like you don't win against Walmart. Nobody wins against Walmart. And in that part, it was very clear that was going to end. And so I said, if I'm going to stay here, I need to be able to find a business. And I'd approached Dave Harris to buy WKMD.
Okay.
Where you have done tremendous. I just love the work that you've done there.
Yeah, thank you. WRZR now.
WRZR.
Yeah. Right, it was WKMD at the time.
WKMD.
Dave Harris.
And Dave had Midwest Printing, and he had that little radio station. Dave was an eccentric. Dave was a character.
Yeah.
And I had a little bit of cash from selling the business, not much, but I figured if I could buy that station from him, then I would have a foundation that I could then build on, because then you've got a megaphone and you can promote other businesses.
Right.
And I loved the concept of radio and dreamed that someday I could actually do that. I never did, but we could never come to terms. And so you know what, this just it isn't meant to be. And I know that Larry Hembry did just phenomenal work making it a great station. And I know they just recently sold as well.
Yeah. So that would have been interesting to see what kind of station you would have made it into. All comedy radio, or pranks or
Right,
something like that. Well, that would
right.
have been interesting. And again, that's an interesting path. And I think of when I think of the home outfitters, um, and in fact, I was doing some research in here just a couple of days ago, and I love to look at the old ads,
Oh, yeah.
that they put out, and it's just not exactly like it is today, as far as, but Larkin Brothers, Home Outfitters, they all, I mean, almost like full page ads every week, right? I
Every
mean,
week.
that,
Oh, yeah,
that
yeah.
was that was where they got the word out at that time.
That's exactly what you did.
Yeah.
And the Lagodi Tribune was a
Mhm.
major player, Shoals
Yeah.
News and some of these other
Mhm.
papers. That's how you did it, and that's
Mhm.
how you advertised. And you could run a good business and do this. It's hard,
Mhm.
but you're going to work your tail off.
Yeah.
But I remember I got my first real job in Chicago, working for a big 8 accounting firm, and I found out they don't work on Saturdays. And I'm such an idiot. I was like, what do you mean you don't work on Saturdays? Like, what do you do?
Mhm.
Like, everybody, I've never had a Saturday off. Like, ever. I've never had a Saturday off. And you get Christmas
Mhm.
Eve off too? You
Yeah.
get holidays? Are you kidding me? Like, the 4th of July is off. And 4th of July, man, you're selling mattresses. Come on, like, get to work, people. Uh,
Oh my gosh. I remember one of the ads. Well, it wasn't just one, but every year during sectional season, home outfitters would, and
yeah.
others would, of course, wish the teams good luck. And we were in high school. We enjoyed all of that. But the one well, people are probably looking at on the screen right now, that's from 1978.
Yeah.
But that was great. We all wish the team. It was a big deal, of course, and wish the teams good luck. But yeah, I mean the advertisements, from was it Jim and Frank's Red and White at one time? Is
Yep.
that
Jim
right?
and Frank's. Yep.
Yeah, and then uh, Larkin Lumber,
Larkin
of
Lumber.
course. So
Yep.
so so the Larkin Lumber. What relative was that?
So he, the one who owned it, Pat Larkin,
Pat Larkin.
and I'm still friends with his son, Frank Larkin. So Frank is out in
Oh,
California,
I
so I
remember
still
Frank.
see Frank, and I saw him just this past year.
Hmm.
And so he he and my dad would have been first cousins.
Okay.
So I guess technically I'd be a first cousin
Hmm.
once removed. But
Okay.
um,
Yeah. So the Larkin building was later Birch's Lawn and Garden.
yeah,
Yep, Paul Birch. And today it's Big John's Collision Center.
yeah.
So I'm doing this as much for Dick as I am for you. You know this. But going way back, are you familiar? My dad talks about Bud and Frank's grocery store. Does that sound familiar?
That one was before my time.
But was it
Um,
Bud Larkin?
there was a Bud.
Yeah,
Yep.
in the family,
Oh,
somewhere
yes.
along the way.
Right.
Okay.
It's a shallow gene pool. Yeah,
He what?
this shallow gene pool.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. And from what I understand, it was near where Betsy's Boutique is today, which is close to Nippy's.
Yeah, yeah,
Which,
yeah.
yeah. So the red and white food market, Jim and Lenore. Did you work there?
I never worked
Never
there.
worked there.
No.
That is the VFW today.
I saw that when I
Yeah.
drove in town. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, that looks nice.
Now I didn't know that your dad was owner or part owner to Handy Mart.
Yes. So my grandfather was the one who owned Handy Mart. So and it was a True Value hardware store,
Yes.
and so he had it. So my grandfather hated to pay retail for anything. So he,
It sounds like a theme here.
oh man, I'm telling you,
That's the way it was, right?
it was,
Yeah.
I still, it kills me to pay retail full price. Full price, you kidding me? Um, Everything's negotiable. Well, whenever he'd have people working, and he was always involved in a bunch of different projects,
Mhm.
he figured that if he owned a hardware store, he could buy tools and supplies wholesale, and then he could also have a store and
Mhm.
offer things to the public. And
Yeah.
so it was kind of another
Mhm.
one of. He also had fabric stores. He had a number of fabric
Mhm.
stores around and upholstery material, and
Mhm.
he he would find things that
Mhm.
people wanted and figure out how to sell it to them, and
Mhm.
very, very industrious.
Yeah, I always love those stores. You go in and I mean, do your Christmas shopping right there. I think it doesn't matter who you're shopping for.
Yep.
You got everything right there. Um, so Handy Mart is where, as you mentioned earlier, Pizza Junction is today. So we talked Larkin Brothers, we talked Home Outfitters, we talked Red and White, Bud and Frank's even, Larkin Lumber. What business connections are we missing here? Any?
I think that's most. That's people are like, enough of the Larkins already, right? No, but there was a ton, and
Yeah.
the great thing about growing up in Lagodi is that people would always come back. Um, the family would keep coming back, and so
Hmm.
we got to know a lot of our extended cousins because they would come back for these reunions. And I
Hmm.
haven't been to one in years, but it was always nice. And then Dick Walker, who wrote about bluebirds, and there was another Larkin
Oh
that just
yes,
passed with
yeah.
the bluebirds, and
Oh my, Bill
I,
Larkin.
I was planning on visiting him,
Yeah,
and I saw that he
yeah,
passed, so I
yeah.
was kind of really bummed. But
If somebody would have given me an idea of the getting to know your Indiana neighbor, and I kick myself for not thinking of it before he just recently passed away, he's got a story, does he not?
oh,
Maybe I'll talk to his daughter or something, but I just kick myself because it's just such a. Have you been out there?
I have not. I've
Oh
just
my
seen
gosh,
pictures and
you
and
have
seen
got.
it.
We were just out there a couple days ago, and I don't know what they're going to do with all the rocks that he painted with all the birdhouses, but yeah, I know you're limited, but you need to get out there if you can.
That was on when we
Hmm.
were planning this trip. That was
Yeah,
part of the stop.
yeah,
And a former coworker of mine from a business in Chicago just visited him 2 days before he passed. And
yeah.
so she was calling me. She's like, "Are you guys related? Like, I know you're
Hmm.
from Lagodi. Like, you have to be related."
Right,
And I said, "Yeah, we're kind of distant
right.
cousins, but
Yeah. So
so
I
the
read
timing."
I read something that you had written, and it was you were working at Larkin Brother, and I think you said one week you were arguing with the Amish in regards to $75 pair of work boots that they're going to wear the rest of their life. And the next week you're in San Francisco selling shoes to these
Oh,
rich people who didn't care what they paid. I mean, is
it
that
was bananas. So after we sold, I didn't know what I was going to do.
yeah.
And I kind of said, well, let's figure it out. I had a friend from college that lived in San Francisco, and he's like, look, you can couch surf and figure out what you're doing.
Mhm.
So um, I called up the company that I used to work for, Deloitte, uh, and I had taken a leave of absence. My wife was convinced me, said, don't quit, just take a leave of absence, because that
Mhm.
way you can leave the door open. So, and I did that. And so I connected with them, and they said, well, yeah, I'm going to be in San Francisco. They said, well, we'll hire you in San Francisco. And a couple things there. So one, it was I joined the small business group. And the first client I had was a Maltese, they were Bruno Magli shoes.
Mhm.
And these shoes were like $1,200
Did you take him back and say, "Look
for
at
a
these,
pair of shoes.
Grandpa"?
I was like, who on their
Yeah,
who in their right mind would pay,
yeah,
and this is back in, well, it was 2 weeks after the earthquake, and when I moved
yeah,
out there in '89,
yeah,
and like who in their right mind would pay
yeah,
$1,000 for a pair of shoes that, frankly, is just a piece of leather and a strap on it?
yeah.
And they catered to tourists. They were right on
Mhm.
a cable car line, and and so and working there at Deloitte, like the first week that I was there, they said we're gonna close the division that you just joined. So I just moved there, and they said you're going to be fired, and you have 2 months, and you're going to be let go. I was like, oh man,
Mhm.
what's the luck? And I said, okay, here's what I know, and this is a lesson from my parents. Like if uh, if you will do the job that nobody else wants to do,
Mhm.
you can get paid really well. And I said, great, give me the clients that nobody else wants, because you got to have clients that nobody else wants. And they said, well, we have this Japanese practice, and everybody hates working for the Japanese because they make you work really long hours. And I was like, Joe Larkin works long
Mhm.
hours. Like
Mhm.
I can do this. Give it, bring it on. And so one of the clients, I had about a dozen Japanese clients. I didn't speak a word of Japanese, but I could kind of figure it out. One of them turned out to be Nintendo's very first licensee, making games. And they were a couple of guys, and they were very eccentric guys, and they had the U.S. office of this Japanese company.
Mhm.
And the one thing we had in common was that they liked to buy drinks, and I like to drink drinks. So we spent a
Mhm.
lot of time together. And they said, "Why don't you come work for us?" And I thought I was going to be their accountant.
Mhm.
And so and I was about to be fired anyway. So I went to work for them, and they said, "Okay, you're in charge of video game sales for the U.S." I said, "You have made the biggest mistake in your life." Um, and I called my dad, and I said, "Dad, boy, I really did this time." And he says, well, are they paying you? I said, yeah, they're paying me. He says, well, figure it out. You can always go back and be an accountant.
But why was it a big mistake?
Well, I didn't know how to sell anything.
Just oh, you didn't you weren't you
I,
didn't
I,
think you were a good
I
salesman
didn't know anything about this stuff or selling video games. Like, who knows this
because
stuff?
they were just starting
It
up.
was like,
Yeah.
I don't even, I grew up where you didn't play video games. You never would put a nickel in or a quarter in a slot or in a jukebox or something or a pinball machine because at the end of the day, the guy who owns the machine is the one who wins, right? And
Yeah, I never thought that way.
hey,
I played pinball machines till,
my dad drilled it into my head. He's like, if you're going to do this, own the machine.
Yeah.
And so he said, just give it a shot. And in that day, it was the very, very, very early days of video games.
Yeah.
When the entire industry held its convention in a tent in the parking lot of the Las Vegas Convention Center because we weren't legit enough to go inside the building. And I just happened to, I was good at it and it worked out and I ended up having a wild career in video games. I spent about a decade there, worked in CD-ROMs and then was that
CD-ROMs.
Worked with the Rolling Stones, publishing their first product and Disney and Paramount and a lot of kind of really cool things. And then that became the internet. And that's where I kind of really started thriving when local advertising and understanding the psychology of somebody making a purchase and doing that. So it's been been a crazy journey.
So you had just learned that. Where did that take you? So kind of fill us in a fairly limited amount of time.
I apologize.
No. This is I do this all the time. We just keep going and going because it's interesting conversation. But so now you found your niche. Where did that niche take you from that point to where you are today?
So okay, we'll keep it quick.
Whatever you want. We're good. They'll watch.
Or not.
Or not. That's what I always tell them. If you want to watch, watch.
TikTok. Okay. That industry has lots of ups and downs. So you have to be prepared to be fired regularly, which I did not like. But
But you were used to it.
Oh man, I've done all kinds of crazy things. Here's the thing: is if you can help somebody else, you can always be employed.
Yeah, that's right.
And
that's right.
You got to just figure it out. And so did video games, did and then worked for what is now Verizon, running. They had a digital studio, and I was running sales and marketing for their digital studio. And as they were going through that merger, they said, we need to get rid of this internet stuff. We don't think this is going to be important. And I was like, I don't think it's going to be important.
You were right.
This thing is going to be important. And we had published a lot of games, but it just hadn't quite connected to be a huge business. And the phone companies really aren't wired for pardon the pun, for the video, the violent sells, right? The reality is, and which kind of I didn't care for. And it wasn't something I was super proud of, that the more violent the product, the more it would sell.
Right.
And I said, ultimately I want to do something that actually creates. And so they said, well, we have this Yellow Pages division, does $3 billion a year, and we need somebody to take it to the internet. And I said, well, I have no idea how to do it. But they said, well, nobody knows how to do it, so try it. And it required me to move from San Diego to Dallas. And my wife and I said, let's stay here. We like California. Let's just pass on that opportunity. Well, then a few years later, another directory publisher was looking for the same thing. And I said, well, GTE offered me that job and I can do it here. Let me just try it. And I started figuring out how to make the technology work where if you're looking for a plumber, you could find a local plumber. And in those days, it was really, really hard to do that. And then the other side was, how do we sell that plumber an ad cheaply and inexpensively enough for them to want to pay for that? And so I was very early on in the creation of useful local business marketing online. And I loved that.
Yeah.
And it was, really great. I got so much joy out of it. I started an advertising agency. We got funded by Netflix and ran it for a couple of years and sold it to a Rupert Murdoch company and moved to Chicago. My wife's from Chicago and she wanted to be back home. So I moved to Chicago and I was running another local advertising group.
This was a different job? You didn't
different
transfer,
job.
you just moved.
A whole different company. I was trying to figure, I said, everybody's carrying phones. Like this is going to, if we can help small businesses connect with local customers on their phone, we can make something happen. And so I didn't invent technology. I just figured out how to put it together and package it and sell it so that people could build like local lists and make that happen. And so I was doing that, and I was working like a dog, like crazy. I have 500 publications. We were also publishing local phone books and community directories. We had 530 of them across the Midwest and hundreds and hundreds of salespeople. And I was just working myself to the end. And at the time, my dad he had dementia. He was in a nursing home close, and I'd go in and see him, several times a week. And when he finally passed, I was like, that's going to be me. Like that's going to be me in about 30 years. And I was like, I don't think the world needs more ads. Like I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do, but I know it's not this. And so I quit my job, and I said, I don't know where I'm going to go. And so I just started talking to everybody I could. The one thing I'm not afraid to do is walk through a door that's locked or crawl in a window and just meet people.
Right.
And there was a couple of guys that had just started a healthcare office to service low-income seniors in a neighborhood in Chicago. I didn't even like driving through this neighborhood. And they were super smart young guys, and they'd raised some money. And they said, we're going to open this healthcare clinic. It's going to be free for low-income seniors, and we're going to provide transportation and a community center and a healthcare center. We're going to do it to these disadvantaged places. And I said, well, that sounds pretty good. And I said, I don't know anything about healthcare. Right? And they said, great. And I said, but I do know like how to connect with people. So in this neighborhood I was afraid to drive through, I was going door to door.
Is that right?
I was scared to death.
Yeah.
I was scared to death. And I didn't speak Spanish. I found a dreamer, a young lady that came here as a child. And I said, okay, Maria, you and I, we're going door to door. Because I know like hard work.
Right.
If we tell people to come in, if we invite people in, and said, if this is a place you want to come, then come. And if it's not, that's okay. Then have a bite and enjoy it. But it turned out. So I asked the guy when they started. I said, well, how many patients do you have today? And he said, oh, maybe less than 200. I said, okay. Turned out it was less than 20.
Oh, well, he wasn't lying.
He wasn't. He was technically telling the truth. Well, I said, well, let's just get after this thing and see. And so started inviting people in. I said, if you can raise money and open these things, I can fill it. And I'll build a team and do that. Well, within 2 years, just 2 years, they had opened up 17 of these centers. They had over 10,000 patients.
What time frame are we talking here?
This is only about 10 years ago.
Okay.
9 years ago. Yeah,
okay.
So we're talking.
So a whole new career for you. Again, probably your career. 6th or 7th career.
Yeah.
Just opened up in the last 10 years.
And so we said, let's invite people in. Well, they have been extraordinarily successful. Now they're about an $8 billion company on the New York Stock Exchange. But 2 years in, that's when someone was reading the jokes that I'd written 20 years ago or 15 years ago or whatever, and said, you can't say that.
Oh yeah, okay.
It was still a pretty good joke.
Yeah.
So he said, we got to fire you because we can't have that. And so I called up their competitor, and they loved it. They said, yeah, come on, like come work with us. And so I did that for another 5 years, and they're family owned and have hundreds of healthcare centers. And then I just 2 years ago got recruited out to California to run a program that helps low-income seniors live in their homes for the rest of their life with wraparound healthcare instead of going to the nursing home. So free programs. It's government-funded programs. And I'm not good at a lot of stuff, but I'm really good at that. And so what I do is I run outreach programs and teach people to go out to be community educators and advisors. And we help people that if it weren't for us, they'd be in a nursing home, but they're able to stay in their home and come into a daycare center and get breakfast and lunch and physical therapy and socialization and have fun, and then go back and live in their homes. And we have in-home health care and all. So it's one that I hopefully, knock wood, will be my last career.
That's what I was going to ask. So you finally found your calling, I guess, at least now. And but is there something that's next, something around the corner?
I do love to write, so I continue to
Okay.
write for fun.
Hmm. You wrote a book, right?
I did write a
Hmm.
book. I just, again, I wanted to prove to myself that I could.
Hmm.
And so I ended up writing. I couldn't tell my story because so much of the information is proprietary around healthcare and all.
Okay.
So a friend of mine had a devastating disease, and so I ended up writing a book for him with him called The Magic of Everyday Giving, and he's the ambassador of joy in it. And the American Heart Association picked it up and promoted it. It did a nice job of getting the word out and
Hmm.
promoting that. But
Yeah.
it's not a career. It's
Right.
not. It's
Right.
something
Right.
that I give
Yeah.
away for free. But it's
Hmm.
fun to go out and do things
Hmm.
and get that expression out.
Yeah. So it's funny as I go through, as I scour your Facebook page, I see all of these positive things on the low incomes
Yep.
seniors and such. But what I was most intrigued at was Ryan Sandberg standing in front of your house in a black and white cow suit, right? Trick or treating. He live in the neighborhood?
So we live a couple of miles from Wrigley Field, or actually about a mile from Wrigley Field,
Hmm.
and my wife loves decorating for Halloween. I
Yeah.
mean, she puts it's Hollywood level smoke machines and flash zombies and all. I mean, it's
It sounds like
crazy.
something you would do,
It
actually.
sounds like something I would do. I help her set it up, but it's all
Hmm.
her deal.
Yeah.
And he was we it draws a crowd around. It's just a little street, and
Hmm.
he draws a crowd. And he was just there trick or treating with his kid, and
Hmm.
everybody, people recognize him like, oh,
Yeah.
Ryan Sandberg, like Mr. Cub,
Yeah.
Ernie Banks, Mr. Cub. But he was, yeah, he was
Hmm.
there. And then occasionally people that are well known will come up and down the
Hmm.
street. It's just a
Hmm.
regular neighborhood.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Here's a complicated question. Where do you call home? You just mentioned Chicago, but I know you're in San Diego or Carlsbad quite often.
You know, Lagodi, you can take the boy out of Lagodi, but you
Yeah.
can't take Lagodi is still like
Hmm.
it's it,
Yeah.
you know. But Chicago has, and I never expected this. Like I did not want to go to Chicago, but there's more of a community feel there
Hmm.
than there is in California. Love the weather in California,
Yeah.
but like we don't know our neighbors. Um, in Chicago, we have a feeling of community,
Hmm.
but there's nothing like coming home.
Hmm.
Like to home is Lagodi.
Yeah. I also saw, again, probably on your Facebook page that pretty difficult selling the old homestead, right? You finally had to sell the homestead in
It
Lagodi,
went.
and yeah,
That was hard.
yeah,
It was hard, but it was time.
yeah.
Fortunately, we were forced to do it because it had been vacant and my dad had moved out.
Okay.
Like the house that I grew up, we had to sell, and it sold for just a pittance. And the
Hmm.
guy who bought it's done a wonderful job of fixing it up. And
Hmm.
then my grandparents' house, which was right next door, they're right on the edge of Lagodi on Highway 50 as you're leaving town. That has sold. I haven't kept up with folks that bought that. And my
Hmm.
wife asked me, she said, we should buy that house. And I'm like,
Yeah.
the
Hmm.
reality is it just doesn't really work.
Hmm. Yeah.
We just it's too far from where we spend our lives.
Right. Your wife is with you in this trip.
Yep.
So
Yep.
what does she think of Artilleria? Well, where's she from?
She's born and raised in Chicago. We've
Okay.
been married now.
All
This
right.
will be 30
So from
years.
one big city to this big city.
One big city to this
Hmm.
big city. And the first time she came, she was reading the Lagodi Tribune, and on the front page was a picture of the police car that the city had bought.
Uh-huh.
And she said, "This is a joke, right?" And I said, "No, this is real. This is big news." And she's like, "They bought a police car, and it's the front page news." And I
Yeah.
said, "Well, not an obituary, so
No,
it's."
no, no. It's still news because does the budget call for it? There's always arguing back and forth,
Yeah,
right, on those
exactly.
sort of things.
But yeah, so
Hmm.
she loves it for what it is,
Hmm.
and kind of for the foundation. And we
Yeah.
were out at the cemetery cleaning graves yesterday, and she was buying flowers and fixing them all up, and making them presentable, and
Hmm.
so she recognized what it is to me.
Yeah. So I like to give my guests kind of a form at the end. If there's anything that I didn't ask or anything you didn't talk about or anything at all, I probably should have let you know this ahead of time, but anything at all that you had maybe thought, oh, this would be good to bring up.
Um, there's a couple things that is first of all, I just thank the community. first of all, I love that you do this.
Mhm.
And so but thanking the community for the support and being there. And it's always a gift, right, of where you can go. And I remember one time we had the furniture stores, and when I came back, and it was the mid '80s were a challenging time. The economics were not great, and we're trying to grow and try not to discount. And I drove around. We had a Jolene Mattingly Wagler worked with us. Just
Classmate of mine, sure.
oh,
She's
she is the bee's knees.
yeah,
Like she's the bomb.
yeah.
So she had arranged for me to drive around and get a bunch of these quilts, and we did an Amish quilt show in one of our stores, and it brought people in. And I said, if we still had the stores, I would recognize it, make it more of a fabric of the community versus the transaction. But I think that recognizing it for what it is, I would love to see more industry, and I still follow it. I still follow it on Facebook and read about it. And Courtney, who does the Martin County Journal,
Courtney Good, yeah.
well, unbelievable
she
job.
she is, and you told me that one time on the phone, maybe the first time we called, and I said, "Wow, you're right. I need to get her on this." I have asked her. She's very, very busy, but I'll get you, Courtney. We'll get you soon.
I don't know how she does it. And then like the Shoals news that Steve puts out his family. But I think that recognizing that every place has a time and a place, and it doesn't last.
Right.
So
Yeah.
enjoy it.
Well, I'll tell you what, enjoy your time here. Enjoy your classmates tonight as we record. It's the alumni banquet, and Dick Larkin will be presenting to our outstanding alumnus of the year, and that's Patrick Summers, who's going to be coming up on getting to know your Indiana neighbor as well. But Dick, I can't thank you enough for the time. Been a blast. I knew it would be.
This is great. Thanks so much. I appreciate the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you. Dick Larkin, I know we got to know him a lot more. Some of you didn't know him at all, but you knew the family. But when you talk about getting to know your Indiana neighbor, whether he's now in Illinois or now in California, we got to know a little bit about Dick Larkin today, didn't we? So that's getting to know your Indiana neighbor for this time. Thank you so much for watching.